Here we are once again, ladies and gentlemen. Adam coming to you with video number 6 in our Wild Colonial Boys Anatomy of a Song video series. This is the second to last one. We have almost come to the end, which is kind of a bittersweet feeling, but I hope you have enjoyed watching these videos as much as we have enjoyed putting them together for you. I'm especially excited because soon you're going to actually get to hear the fruits of our labor, and we're going to put together a little music video for you as well. That'll be in the next video though. In this video, we are finally going to mix our song. We have two main sections for you to discuss today. We're going to go inside our DAW, our digital audio workstation, Pro Tools, and we're going to put together a little tutorial for you on how we edit what we've recorded and then how we mix it together, right? We have our recorded tracks. Those are our ingredients. Now we need to mix them all together and bake our song cake. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to show you editing. We're going to show you mixing. Without further ado, let's get to it. Ooh, like magic, here we are inside Pro Tools. This is the program that we use to record. This is a DAW, a digital audio workstation. We are currently looking at what is called the edit window because that's what we're going to be talking about in this next section, editing. Once you've recorded your takes, you've got your drum takes and your bass takes and your acoustic guitars, etc., etc. The next step, what I like to do is make sure everything is as perfect as I can get it through the use of digital editing. These DAWs are really, really powerful in that you can use them to manipulate sound digitally and seamlessly. You can, just like you can in a word processor, move words around and cut and paste. You can do that in here as well, and it's really powerful, and it enables you what we call comp together the best take possible. And for this example, I'm going to use our lead vocal track, which has been assembled and tuned, and that's this horizontal strip with the darker color in the middle of it here. That's our lead vocal. I can zoom out. I can squish it left and right. Each of these little deals here is a waveform. If you zoom way in, this is actually, look at that, the audio of the waveform, the digital sound hitting the computer. And if we zoom out, each of these little blurbs is a phrase in the vocal, and you can hear it. I have it soloed here, meaning it's the only thing you're going to hear. Ever have one of those days? Now, if we had it in the song, in the context of the whole thing. Ever have one of those days? The goal is to put together the best take you can get if you don't get it at the mic. The philosophy we use here is to try to get it right at the mic or at the source, meaning put a mic up, press record, and capture the best possible performance you're going to get. Sometimes, though, there's flubs, there's small minor errors, and we can use some minor editing to correct those things. Pro Tools enables us, if we go to this playlist view here, enables us to record multiple passes and save them all in a little playlist folder, if you will. Each of these things, LeadVox Plus, LeadVox 03, LeadVox 01, LeadVox 02, these are all different takes of the same vocal. If I solo each of these in turn, they are slightly different. Ever have one of those days? Ever have one of those days? Ever have one of those days? Obviously, if I'm doing the same thing, if I'm recording the same line, they're going to be somewhat similar because it's me and I'm trying to, sing a melody, but there are subtle differences in it. And so what I would do is go through this entire song line by line, and there's not a ton of them, but line by line, and find the best little blurb for each one. Let's say I liked this one, for example. Ever have one of those days? I really like that one. That's great. I can just press this little button, boom, and it goes right up to the top of the active track, and you can just mix and match. Let's say this version. When everything seems out of phase. That sounds really great. It sounds like I really had all the soul I wanted in there, and I can promote that to the top level. Ever have one of those days when everything seems out of phase? Right? That's two different takes. You have the ability, just like in film editing, to move stuff around and cobble together the best take from a variety of takes, right? Now, if you'll notice, you hear that? That vocal, that breath, and that little pop, because it's going from one different clip to another. What we can do through the magic of this, I can put in a crossfade, and now, if I've done it right, you'll never hear that. The only breath you hear is the one at the very beginning of me singing. Editing is a really powerful part of the process. You don't want to overdo it. You do want to make it sound natural, and you do want to keep it to a minimum so that you're still getting the heart and the soul of the live performance that was done in creating the track. At least for this style of music, I think it's better to leave subtle inconsistencies in if you can, because it sounds more human. A lot of modern productions, a lot of pop music and dance music and that kind of thing is so heavily edited that it sounds robotic. All the beats are exactly lined up to the grid. All the vocals have been perfectly tuned, and it kind of sucks the life out of it. And that serves, that genre, and that's what they do, and that's fine. But for, Irish music, Celtic rock music, a little bit more down and dirty is a better approach. What I would do basically is go through all the song, all the different tracks, and you can see we have a ton of different tracks here. We've got drums, we've got shaker tracks, bass tracks, acoustic guitars, electric guitars. You can see things have been edited together a little bit so that you get the best takes. Find the best overall performance that way. Okay, all these are tracks, and I'd go through there and I'd get the best I have of each individual thing, and that will help us mix our song and make it that much cooler. And that's what we're going to look at in the next section. Once we are done with editing, we reach the mixing phase, which is arguably the most talked about part of making a song, recording a song. I'm not going to say it's the most important, because while it is critical, every part of the recording process is critical, especially getting it right at the mic. If you want a good mix, you need good recordings. You need well-recorded tracks. If you get a great take coming in, you're going to have a good mix. You get tracks that are very easy to work with. So let's talk about mixing. That's sort of baking our cake, to use the analogy that I've used a few times here. Mixing is where we stir all our ingredients together. There are, generally speaking, 3 dimensions that we worry about in a mix of recorded music. We just like a cube or a box has height, width, and depth, so too does our mix. You can think of the height of the recording, the volume levels of each of the individual instruments, how loud or soft each individual track is relative to the others. Width we talk about when we describe what's called panning, which is the positioning of the instruments in the stereo field, from left to right. When you're listening to something on your headphones, for example, where panning becomes most obvious, in like a set of earbuds or what have you. Listen to like an old Beatles album. Listen to Sgt. Pepper's or what have you. They use a lot of stereo panning there that is pretty dramatic. Certain instruments are only in the left side, certain instruments are only in the right side. If you take one of your earbuds out of your ear, you can actually physically lose half the mix because it's only in that ear that you pulled out, right? That's panning. That's our width, and I'll describe that momentarily here. And then we have depth, which is how close up an instrument sounds versus how far away it sounds. And we use tools like reverb and delay to allow us to create depth, using those plugins to create ambience. Basically, the further away, the more reverb something has, the further away it sounds. So, what are we talking about here? I'm going to use in this example here. First of all, here's the first verse of the song.
Ever have one of those days when everything seems out of phase?
For our examples here, I'm going to use an acoustic guitar. We'll solo that. Right now I can control the height of it, or the relative volume of it, using my fader here, right? Louder, softer. Right now it's panned right up the middle. That's what this knob is for. I can pan it left. I can pan it right. Here where it goes, left, right, and I can put that in any place in the mix that I want. If you'll notice, these panning knobs, some of them are left, some of them are right, some of them are up the middle. That gives us some stereo space to our mix and allows everything to kind of breathe and have its own place. Very important. We don't want everything crowded up the middle. That's height, width, and depth. We can sweeten the sound of each individual track using what are called plugins. Plugins simply are pieces of software that you can insert on a track in Pro Tools to affect or change the sound of an individual instrument. Plugins can do lots of different things. We have two of the most important ones called EQ, or equalization, and compression. You can insert them separately, or I like this. This is called the Waves SSL bundle, Solid State Logic, which is the name of a very famous and very expensive large studio console, a big analog desk. This is an emulation, a digital emulation of a channel on the desk, and it has in it an EQ, it has compression, it has a gate and an expander, and fancy terminology, but basically we'll start with EQ. What an EQ is, very simply, you've used one many times on your car radio, the knobs that say bass and treble, those are very simple EQ tools, equalization. Each sound, each instrument that you hear, or each mix that you hear, is made up of bandwidth, which is the audio spectrum that you hear. If you want to get technical, it goes from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz from low to high. That's what the human ear hears. And that's made up of hundreds of individual frequency bands that you can manipulate to change the sound. If you want something lower sounding, you add bass to it. If you want something high end, you add treble. In the middle, it's mid-range. If we got our acoustic guitar here, let's say, for example, I wanted this to sound brighter or sound more like high-endy. I could dial in more high-end. You hear that? The low end kind of goes away to clear some of the mud. Let's say I want a lot of low end. Hear that? Okay. So that's EQ. And your goal with EQ is to find a place in the mix for this instrument. And so you pay attention to what it sounds like at its best. You find the frequencies simply by trial and error, dialing around for them. And less is more here. Subtlety is key. You want a lot of small changes adding up to a big result, as opposed to massive cuts across a lot of different frequency bands. But again, in general terms, EQ enables us to shape our sound, bass, treble, mid-range. This is, to me, a nice, pleasing acoustic guitar sound.
Everything seems out of phase.
You can hear the acoustic in the mix. It doesn't overwhelm anything, and it's not lost. So the other important plugin type that we use is called compression. Compression is one of the most misunderstood and hard to get your head around plugins to use. It's also absolutely key. If you don't know how to use compression well, you're not going to get a good mix. Really, though, it's frustratingly simple. All compression is, if you can think of it this way, is an automatic volume control. It's like a little guy in a box that's got his hand on a big volume knob, and if he senses something getting too loud, he turns it down. If he senses something isn't loud enough, he turns it up, and it tries to maintain a steady volume level, okay? Using compression properly allows you to have tracks in your mix that are consistent and easier to handle, as opposed to jagged sounds that are all over the place, wild, out of control. You can have a compressor that's a standalone plugin by itself. This Waves thing, the Waves SSL channel strip, allows me to have a compressor, which is this thing right here, in along with my EQ. So I get EQ and compression in one plugin. Compression has four main controls: the ratio, the threshold, the release, and the attack. And without going into too much detail, I like nice subtle compression, a ratio of 2 to 3, and just basically allow it to control the sound. See this little red, this light, the orange light here? That's the compressor going on and off. It's reducing 3 decibels of overall level on the sound so that I can reduce the peaks that the sound has and smooth it out. That's the purpose of compression, is to smooth it out and make it more consistent. I won't go too much into the details, but that's compression. I've got EQ and compression across the same plugin across all my channels so that I have the ability to EQ and compress each one of them to taste, right? So that's a very general layman's overview of EQ and compression. In addition to EQ and compression, other plugins, and there's lots of different types of plugins, but two that are used to a great extent. Reverb and delay are very important as well, and as I mentioned previously, those help us create ambience and create depth in our recording. Reverb and delay are related in that they both create echoes in a way. Reverb is essentially the sound you get if you're in a big tunnel and you hear your voice echo off the walls, or you clap and you hear that spacious, lush kind of decaying sound. That's reverb, reverberation. And on our acoustic, it sounds like this. I have a reverb plugin over here. This guy, that's a reverb. This is the Steven Slate Verb Suite Classics, which is a great reverb plugin. I have a reverb send set up, so I'm sending a signal from this acoustic guitar track out to that reverb, and I can control how much level I have. So here it is dry, as we call it, with no effects. Okay, and I'm going to dial in some reverb. That's a really extreme example that I've set up for you because that much reverb sounds really washy and you get kind of lost in it. Okay, so you put reverb on things to add space to your mix, to allow them, allow stuff to kind of sit a little bit deeper back. If we play our mix,
Ever have one of those days
it's got reverb on there.
when everything
Now it doesn't.
seems out of phase? The pieces
Hopefully you can hear that. It's subtle, but if it's not there, it's missing. You can tell it's missing, and that's what we want. We don't want to hit you in the face with tons of washy reverb because it'll sound muddy and it'll sound kind of gross. But used well, used appropriately, it adds a nice sense of space to our mix. The other one that I discussed is called delay. Delay is like reverb in that it's an ambience effect, but it creates specific repeats of the sound that you're hearing. Okay, so again, using our acoustic guitar, and I'm going to dial in some delay now. Hear that? It repeats a specific length of time and number of times. Again, that's an extreme example just for the purposes of you hearing it. And used in a mix on the right things, the lead vocal, for example, sometimes guitar, it can sound really cool. So reverb and delay are useful in adding depth to our recording. So basically what I'll do is I'll go through everything on the mix, and those are all the tracks and stuff that I have, and I will place everything accordingly. I'll find a space for every instrument, all the drums, the bass, the guitars, fiddles, vocals, all that stuff. And I'll use EQ, I'll use compression, I'll use reverb and delay sparingly to create a space for each one of those things. Panning as well, and volume levels, loud and soft.
Ever have one of those days?
I get something like that pumps and sounds good and is nice and moving, right? But we're not quite done there. A mix is not static. Things come in and out. Things change in volume according to section and need, and you need to pay attention to every one of those things. So I will write automation across everything so that the mix moves up and down appropriately, and I'm getting every instrument sitting perfectly and exactly where I want it to go. That is key. Back in the old days, before they had computer recording and before they had automation circuitry, which they started building into analog desks in the 90s, I think, a guy or two or three guys, engineers and the producer, would sit at the desk and basically play the mix. They will move instruments' faders up and down as the mix plays so that they set each level accordingly per section, and just basically fly around on the faders live. Once I've got my automation in place, once I've got every instrument sitting where I want it to be, I will bounce a mix down, which essentially means that I will record it, and I will say, this is my final 2-track mix. I'll record it down to stereo, bounce it to disc, and it will create a final 2-track mix, 2 tracks left and right, which is what you hear when you listen to a piece of music. Our high resolution version will be a WAV file, .wav is the file type, and then I can make an MP3 out of that for people to hear using their computer, using iTunes, what have you. That is essentially how we mix. That's what it looks like. That is how we edit and mix a song in Pro Tools. Very broad strokes. The whole thing takes a long time to complete because it's so detail oriented, but you get kind of an overview of what we're doing, right? In the next video, the final video, we will show you how we master our song. I'll explain that when we get to it next week. We will explain a little bit about how we release the song, how we get it up and available to you online for purchase or what have you, and we'll give you the final product. We'll show you our music video featuring our new single, A New Day's Coming. So that's all next week. Thanks a lot for watching, and don't forget to cruise over to Facebook, give Wild Colonial Boys a like, if you haven't already. And if you wouldn't mind showing some love for Varsity Audio and the Skeleton Room too, we, of course, will love you back. But thanks again, everybody, and have a great one. We'll see you next time.